I'm Albert Barrocas, a member of ASPEN, actually a charter member since 1976. And today is my privilege, in preparation for our 50th anniversary of ASPEN, to interview a great friend, great leader, great founder of ASPEN, Dr. Murray Seltzer. I'll be asking a couple of questions and hope that we can enhance our historical perspective on the genesis of ASPEN. Uh, Good afternoon, Murray. It's great to rekindle our friendship after all these years. I'm sorry that you're not going to be with us uh, in Columbus, but I would like to ask you a couple of questions to begin. First of all, can you give us a summary of your education background, et cetera, so that people will know uh, how you trained?
Yeah, I did my pre-med college at Franklin and Marshall College from 57 to 61. And then I was at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine from 61 to 65. And from 65 to 71, I interned and did my general surgical residency at the hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. And that was during the time that hyperalimentation was developed.
So what? So that was your interest. Have you had any previous interest in nutrition at that time, or this is?
Not particularly before that. And as you know, medical schools taught virtually nothing at that time about nutrition.
And tragically, nothing has changed much because they still under I think out of 124 schools, only 5 or fewer have a mandatory nutrition course. But how did you become further interested in nutrition? Can you give us a little bit of background as to what was going on at the time of your residency when, if you finished in 71, the work of Wilmore Dudrick was going on, started, I think Dudrick started around 65, 66 with the dogs.
Yeah, University of Pennsylvania, the hospital and the residency program required that you do 1 year of bench research, basically. And Stan was 4 years older than I was, and he was a graduate of Franklin and Marshall College also. So when I arrived on the scene, we sort of, even though we weren't in college together, we were united over that fact. And I was acutely aware of the research that he was doing, as were all of the residents. And as it became more developed towards the end of the residency, we were using this on patients clinically. So it was really exciting because here we are, these young people, and we're becoming world experts at something by being in the right place at the right time.
Wonderful. What else can you tell us a little bit about the background, the genesis of Aspen? What triggered the interest? Why was it necessary to have a specific society?
We recognized the uniqueness of intravenous hyperalimentation and the use of enteral nutrition. But to be honest, our group was fired up more by being at Penn and the IV hyperalimentation. And then we realized there was no way to quickly spread this information. And to Mitch Kaminsky's credit, unfortunately, he died not long ago. He was the one on numerous organizations of other names in the Washington area that tried to develop this, but it didn't come off. And then the AMA Department of Nutrition, Margarita Nagy, sponsored a Chicago program on fat emulsion. And by history, Ezra Steiger was coming to New Jersey, where I had entered practice after the Army. And Ezra was going to go out to the fat emulsion meeting, and we decided to fly out together. I'm going to digress a little bit for a second. Ezra had a morbid fear of flying. So, being interested in nutrition on the flight, I ate my dinner and his. Uh, But when we got to this meeting, after the meeting adjourned on fat emulsion, Mitch Kaminsky started to organize the group, and it had been announced ahead of time, and there were 100 of us. This was 75, I believe. And as the group was forming, we formed an executive committee. Now, most of the people on the executive committee, organizing committee, it was called, were academics, and I was in private practice. So they looked at me and said, well, you know how to handle money. You're the treasurer. Okay. And Ann Barlow, the medical director of Abbott Laboratories, gave me a personal check for $50 saying this is for postage. And that got us started. Also, when you ask my interest, while in the Army, fresh out of residency, I started a nutrition support service working in conjunction with the pharmacists at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And then when I went into practice, the chairman of the department asked me to organize a nutrition support service. So this is why I immediately went for the fat emulsion. The pharmaceutical companies recognized that we as an organization could market their products better than they could because we could educate the hospital and medical community. So we, right off the bat, by traveling around exhaustively, I've got to tell you, most of us had to look at a matchbook in a hotel room to see where we were. We were changing cities so quickly. But we were given 6 $25,000 grants from the pharmaceutical and equipment companies. 25,000 then is close to 150,000 buying power today. So they really, really stood behind us, and we were able to then launch ASPEN.
And y'all did a wonderful job. Tell me a little bit more about the things that you did in the background, because there's something that you have not related so far about, as a treasurer, the fact that you had to keep certain things to yourself rather than giving it to the managing company.
Well, you know, surgeons like yourself and me, we're cautious people. And we cover, you know, it's the old carpenter story, measure twice, cut once. And as a result, we got large enough, and the money, as you could hear, was coming in reasonably sufficiently, that we hired a local management company from New Jersey to coordinate us, keep computer records of membership and all of the rest of it. And they wanted total control, and that made me very paranoid in case we parted ways or we had a dispute. Everything was to be in their hands, and I refused. I kept control of all the money in bank accounts, reporting to the rest of the executive committee, and only gave them enough money to function and pay for their services. I also always had an updated membership list. So if we parted ways, I could regroup the organization with membership and money.
Now, in 1979, there was a very interesting article called the Instant Nutritional Assessment by you and your dietitian. And that took hold. Can you tell us a little bit about that, the Instant Nutritional Assessment of the time?
Yeah, what happened was most of the people were academics. So they had these sophisticated evaluation for patients, and the average Joe like me in a community hospital, even though we were a large hospital, we still didn't have the ability to do what George Blackburn, Bistrian, and the others were doing. So it was at a local Philadelphia thing one night. Mike Caldwell and I were out, Mike being the first editor of JAPEN. And we were batting things around at 2 in the morning. And I said to him, look, I'll bet you I can do an assessment with just albumin and total lymphocyte count. Now, I understand in the subsequent decades, albumin is no longer considered a nutritional monitor, but call a rose by any other name, it was a good predictor. And as a result of that, we did our study and we published Instant Nutritional Assessment, which is still a easy to use marker. And those values come back on every CBC and SMA-12 that's ordered on a patient today. So you don't have to order any special diagnostic test. The fact that albumin is not a nutritional marker, I would say, fine, let's rename what the test is, but it's a test associated with morbidity and mortality.
You're correct. I wanted to point that out because that was a significant contribution that you made that needs to be recognized in any kind of historical, review of ASPEN and nutrition support. Now, Dr. Alfredo Lopez was a professor of nutrition at LSU, Louisiana State University, and he took that one step further and added the weight, and he called it the law. Lymphocytes, albumin, and weight loss. And we promulgated that throughout the New Orleans, Louisiana, and the Mississippi Gulf Coast area for people to at least get involved and know that no matter where you are, no matter who you are, you can provide that kind of screening, and from that go on to further identify people at risk. But let's go on. Do you have any other recollections of any major things that occur in the early days that were significant, things that might have created a potential dissolution of the society?
Yeah, there were a couple things. One, we were challenged with a potential lawsuit by using the name ASPEN because there was an organization that pre-existed us. And that was the reason in the early days we had a punctuation mark period after each letter of ASPEN. That's been done away with now, obviously, but back then it was necessary. The other early on was, how do we get credibility for the journal as opposed to it being a throwaway? And Mike Caldwell, to his credit, somehow got us accredited so early that we were in Index Medicus and we were accredited. I can't remember who does the accreditation, but we became a real journal respected due to his efforts and some others very, very quickly. And that was a milestone move for us. And the other was the readiness of the multidisciplinary approach. We had no problem from day one getting PhDs in nutrition, in addition to physicians, getting the nurses, the dietitians, the pharmacists on board, and everybody got along nicely. And the thing I'd like to point out is, you're a mature organization now, and after 50 years, you've got all the age groups. When we started, other than people like Dr. Rhodes and Harry Vars and some of the others, this was a vibrant, young group of people in their 20s and 30s. And just the socializing at the annual meetings was one big party, so to speak. So that was important. The other important feature to make the organization viable was we got a board of advisors of very respected, prominent people. We were afraid that each former president would go on to another organization that would diminish us. So we put all the former presidents on the board of advisors so that their loyalty would stay to us and they wouldn't run off and develop something else.
And it continues to the present. And even with a couple of stragglers that were not presidents, such as myself, I feel very privileged to be in that group. Going back to the genesis, one of the stories that I've heard is that one of the reasons why Kaminsky and the organizing committee was very interested in a separate society was the fact that the other major societies like American College of Surgeons, the AMA, were not really that enthused about the new technology and having a separate group within the larger organizations. Is that true, or did you get
I'm
some
not sure,
pushback?
but I imagine that it was because we weren't hearing from those organizations. Nutrition was just not a hot topic in medicine, and Mitch deserves a tremendous amount of credit. Again, the organization wanted credibility, And it was for that reason that Stan was made president. It was an honorary presidency for him because he deserved it. And I always thought that a Nobel Prize should have been awarded because of what the novelty and usefulness to humanity was of this. Unfortunately, that never happened. So we honored him ourselves by making him the first president. And then because of George Blackburn's work, he became the second president, and then Mitch was the third.
Right. And I'd like to add that we did also recognize Stan with the first ever Lifetime Achievement Award, just in
Right.
recent years, about a year or two before he passed. Well, tell me, as you look at the future, what do you see both in terms of ASPEN, but also in terms of the nutrition support field?
Well, okay, I just want to go back for 1 second
Sure.
because I didn't acknowledge you and your peer group at that time for carrying this organization forward. We as starters did our part, but it wouldn't have progressed without you and your peer group pushing
Thank
it
you.
forward. In 1987, I made a career decision because breast disease and breast cancer had been my interest. And I totally limited my surgical practice to breast cancer. So I have been a grandfather who watches a medical grandchild grow, but have not been active in the field for approximately 40 years. And my fear in watching ASPEN through the years was that it would lose its focus on intravenous and enteral nutrition because I never became aware of the other organizations in medicine picking up to the same extent on hyperalimentation and enteral nutrition the way ASPEN did. After your invitation to do this Zoom, I really started thinking about it, and there are diseases where I don't know how many other people are looking into A, nutrition related to them, and B, particularly nutrition that might not be able to be obtained from traditional food or would have to be given intravenously. And I'm wondering how many areas of nutrition have not been explored in Alzheimer's. How many trace minerals, how many vitamins have not been looked into the formation of these deposits in the brain. And pick any other disease you want. And as you as an organization can get grant money and are awarding grant money, I would like to see ASPEN be the front runner in always discovering where these little tiny areas of nutrition could blossom into major treatments, particularly if it required parenteral or enteral nutrition.
Any other recollections that you have?
It's hard for me to convey the excitement to you. There was a vibrancy in doing something new and rather revolutionary. I mean, George Blackburn would call me at 1 in the morning because he got something in his head, and we would chat. And when we traveled, a lot of those guys taught me how to drink because we did our convening late at night in some hotel bar that stayed open until 4 in the morning, and we would shoot the breeze and come up with new ideas and new plans and some of the early crowd. I mean, Ronnie Chernoff was extremely instrumental in all of these type things, and oh, I should have recalled more of the names of many of the people. Mary Hoppy early on was active, Bernadette Slocum, and there were just so many people who were important people early on, other than the physicians, in getting this going.
To your credit and to the early group, the excitement that you had was equally shared by us in the community hospitals as we heard of things. It was sort of the spark that stimulated a lot of the community-based folks. And it was just great to have the ability to pick up the phone and either call you or call Bruce Bistrian about questions, and it didn't matter whether you were a nurse, a dietitian, whether you were in small community hall. I was in private practice.
Let me also mention to you
Sure.
how the tree branch spread on this. These are the people, some of the people who were residents at the same time that Stan was doing this. And some of the names you will recognize. Bill Carreri was one. Ted Copeland, Jimmy Long was there at that time. Ezra Steiger at the Cleveland Clinic later on. Bruce McFadden down in Texas. Howard Silberman out at USC, Bob Ruberg, Jim Mullen back at Penn. These were all residents at the time that Dudrick and Wilmore and Vars and Rhodes were developing this. So these people, many of them obviously stayed academic and were building this along for national education.
And John Daly.
Absolutely. Well, just as an aside about enterol, I don't know if the younger people know that the problem with the early astronauts in the space capsules was that you couldn't defecate, and the nutrition support for them prior to what we used to know as Ensure or anything else was the elemental diet. And Henry Randall at Brown University was one of the first to help develop that.
Now, there is one memory that we share that I like for you to sort of, rattle your brain. In 1984, I was asked to, I think it was 84, I was asked to put together a program for the Society of Critical Care Medicine. And you were one of the speakers that I selected and was glad that you agreed. And there was something very, very unusual that got the audience's attention. Would you like to relate a little bit of that?
Yeah, well, what happened was I figured they were going to go to sleep when they heard nutrition. And I was not really a nationally known person. I had this little niche of expertise, but I figured I had to do something to get their attention. So you and I conferred before I got on the podium, and I said, just make believe when I do what I'm going to do that you come over and talk to me and whisper in my ear. So I got up to the podium and I said, nutrition support's a worthless endeavor. Thank you, goodbye. And I walked off the podium and they were like, their jaws were dropping. And you and I made believe we were whispering. And then I went back up to the podium and said, Dr. Barrocas said I won't get reimbursed for my expenses if I don't give the lecture. So here goes.
And it was unbelievably outstanding and well accepted, and no one went to sleep. Subsequent to that, I was asked to give a series of lectures throughout the country with 300 people in the audience and all that, and I pulled the same trick, and it really got their attention.
Glad it worked.
Listen, I really appreciate your time. I'm sorry you're not going to be there. Thank you again for all your contributions, your friendship, your personal mentoring, and great memories. So we appreciate your contribution.
Well, I want to thank ASPEN for remembering me and inviting me to do this. I wish I could be in Columbus with you, but it's a little difficult at the moment. And, I was a dropout from the organization, but you've not been a dropout. And for you as a practicing surgeon, which is extremely difficult to maintain a 50-year commitment to this organization, I think you really deserve tremendous praise, and I'm proud to be your friend and proud to be some part of ASPEN.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.